Welcome home. We are WNST. Tassel, Baltimore, AM 1570, still there. Set a place on your dial. We are going into, I've been doing this a long time, 33 years. Luke will tell you, I've been looking forward to Labor Day more than most years because we haven't had this sort of promise of two parades. I wrote a huge Labor Day, Independence Day sort of working screed out of Baltimore Positive. Lots of letters are on the way, columnists and a whole bunch of dear letters. Dear Eric DaCosta comes this week, so you'll want to check that out. Luke is working hard as well, doing double duty with the Orioles and the Ravens all week long. The Ravens in Kansas City on Thursday night. The Orioles trying to get that 1 seed, win that division, and make that thing happen. And the Ravens get their thing going. Dude, Friday, we're actually going to have a real game to talk about. Imagine that. All this fake football, all these practices that you've seen that I haven't seen, and all of the draft and all of the offseason and all the everything. This one's big on Thursday night, Luke. This is an exciting game to be a part of. I don't know that I've ever looked forward to a regular season game, in a way, or a kickoff game for the Ravens as much as I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a kickoff game, I don't know if I'd say a regular season game in general, because it's just too early, right? I mean, they've played big games in December. They played big games in early January at this point with the schedule being what it is with 17 games. But I just think everyone is beyond ready. And when I say everyone, I mean coaches, players, front office, the organization, fans, media, anyone that has any connection to the Baltimore Ravens is ready for this. This has been an excruciating offseason in the aftermath of losing the AFC title game at home, knowing you're playing the Chiefs right off the bat. And I think that would apply whoever they'd be playing in week one. But it's just magnified when it is the Chiefs and you're going to Arrowhead and you're going to see them raise their championship banner and all of that. It's the big celebration, the big showcase, for the NFL to kick off the season. But it's time to play a game. I mean, it really is, especially with what the preseason has become, where you're not even getting a cameo from most of your starters. It's time to have something tangible to talk about. We've talked so much about what happened in January and the attrition and the coaches lost and the players lost and all of that you want something to talk about, something concrete to talk about. And to your point, with it being the Chiefs, yeah, it is bigger. It is magnified. You and I argued about this a couple weeks ago in terms of trying to size up the significance of this game. And the thing I'll say right off the bat is the Buffalo Bills have beat the Chiefs multiple times in the regular seasons. And we've seen how that's turned out in January. So there's nothing, this isn't a revenge game. This isn't exercising demons. This isn't getting the monkey off your back. But winning sure beats the alternative of losing on Thursday night. And then all of those same storylines are still there. And, oh, yeah, you're 0-1 also. Doesn't mean all is lost. Doesn't mean the season's going down the drain or anything like that, obviously. But
don't tell me that on Friday. It'll feel that way on Friday. It really will.
It'll feel that way, but it won't be true. It won't be true. But I think for this team, with the turnover that they've had, with bringing in Derrick Henry, offensive line questions galore, obviously with the human element with Joe D'Alessandris making that even more difficult on the field. But it's time to get a data point, right? It's time to size this up. I mean, week one, there's so much unknown. Right. And Kansas City, same thing. Right. I mean, L'Jarius Sneed gone. Right. I mean, other players from that group aren't returning. Still, hey, it's Patrick Mahomes. It's Andy Reid. Right. It's the Chiefs. They're inevitable. Right. They're the team to beat. I think everyone agrees with that. But, each team has undergone changes and you want to kind of see what it looks like. And just because something looked a certain way last year doesn't mean that's how it's going to look this year. So I think there's always so much week one curiosity. And I mean, John Harbaugh even talks about it every year. Until you go out and see it with the bullets flying for real, you don't really know. You can have an idea. You can be confident, or you can be not so confident, and then you're pleasantly surprised, right? I mean, maybe the offensive line comes out and controls things at the line of scrimmage. Who knows? I'm not expecting that, but anything could happen. So
what are you expecting?
There's just
let me interrupt you, because we've talked about what are your expectations for where strengths and weaknesses will lie. And if they win this game on Thursday night, why do they win this game? I mean, I think we all look at it and say, Derrick Henry, they'll run the ball better. What are they going to do better than they did in January? It'd be a different game, different team, different everything. But what are they going to do to play better on Thursday night than they did last January? And how are they a diminished team? We talk about Zach Orr and Mike McDonald, the defense, and whatever Patrick Queens that aren't around anymore, and whatever Jadeveon Clowney's that aren't around anymore, as well as Zeitler and Moses and some other guys. But what do you expect this team? How are they going to win on Thursday night?
Because they're the Baltimore Ravens and they have Lamar Jackson at quarterback. I mean, they do what they did for 18 games last year until they got to the AFC Championship game. I mean, this isn't some. I mean, this is part of my pushback on the Derrick Henry narrative. I mean, this team was number 1 in rushing last year, right? It's not like they didn't run the ball all year. It's not like that was their fatal flaw throughout the season. Like, I get it. Gus Edwards was a diminished version of what he had been in previous years, and J.K. Dobbins went down in week 1 and everything. There's not some magic fix that they had to fundamentally transform themselves. They've got to play better on the biggest stage. I mean, it's that, and that's why this is so excruciating, because I've heard people break down the schedule and all these different things that could go differently and might be the difference of the Ravens getting over the hump. It's like, what are we talking about here? They were the best team in football last year. They just weren't for 3 hours on that Sunday because the Chiefs handled them, and give the Chiefs all the credit in the world. And the Ravens lost, and they played poorly, and they deserved to lose that day. But as it pertains to how the Ravens go out and play, yeah, they're going to need to run the ball, and that's something that they want to do. But it's more than that. You've got to score inside the red zone. You got to score touchdowns inside the red zone, right? We've talked about this for years with the Chiefs. And yes, even though they played a 17-10 game in the AFC title game, that doesn't mean it's going to be 17-10 again. In fact, I absolutely am expecting more scoring than that from both sides. But you've got to run the ball. The offensive line, you better be ready for the blitz. They blitzed Lamar Jackson heavily last year, and that was with Kevin Zeitler and Morgan Moses and John Simpson. So they better be on their P's and Q's. I mean, Tyler Linderbaum's back healthy, practicing. He's not even on the injury report. That neck issue that he had in August, as we said all along, was precautionary. But boy, they better handle the crowd noise. They better be on point pre-snap. Lamar's got to get them in the right protections. Linderbaum's got to get them in the right protections. Ball's got to come out quickly. You got to use play action, and obviously that ties in with their running game. But it's not. Let me be clear. The Chiefs are the team to beat, but even the Ravens losing, it's not like the Chiefs beat them by 4 touchdowns in that game, right? I mean, self-inflicted mistakes were so huge in that game, whether we're talking about Lamar throwing into triple coverage, Marquise Brown, who's on the other side and not playing on Thursday night. Zay Flowers fumbled the ball going across the goal line. They had some ill-timed penalties at the end of the first half defensively that gave Kansas City another field goal that proved to be pretty big in terms of that game. It's not this, this magic formula that they need. They go out there and play good football. This team, other than the offensive line, which is a complete unknown right now, and that's a legitimate concern. That's a legitimate major question. Yeah, there are other questions.
Do you think there's any chance the offensive line could be really good? I mean, as much as we've talked about it as being a question mark or whatever, could it be really good? I mean, could Voorhees be really good? I don't think so. As much as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking like, I don't think there's any chance this is going to look like Larry Allen and the Cowboys from 30. Like there's no chance this is going to look like the 19 Marshall Yonda, Orlando Brown, Ronnie Stanley, greater machine. I don't think there's any way it can look that good. But I am wondering how good it can look.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually talking about this with someone in the building last week. I think if you have an offensive line in week 1, and we're working under the assumption that it's going to be Voorhees at left guard, going to be Falele at right guard, I think at the very least we're going to see McCary out there. Now, if he's rotating with Rosengarten a little bit, something like that. But I think we're going to start off the year seeing McCary out there. It might be a timeshare. I think Rosengarten will be the right tackle at some point, not too deep into the season. I think that's the plan. I think it's always easier, and you know this, Nestor, how they've generally operated whenever they have competitions like that. It's always easier to start with the veteran guy and then go to the youngster rather than the other way around. You'd much rather go that route.
And by the
So
way, I had Matt Skura on this week after his words on Joe D'Alessandro. He talked at length about McCary and about Ronnie. And he played with these guys,
Sure.
a lot of these guys. And so he talked about what that's like with this offensive line trying to mesh. And he even talked about his first game, by the way, and all these individual players, I don't remember this, but I got into the conversation. He's like, my first game was the game in Wembley. And I'm like, oh my God, like, wow, but that was a week 3 assignment for a very young offensive lineman who was didn't go well. I don't know what his role in the loss was, but I know the game didn't go well. I don't have his, his Pro Football Focus breakdowns from 2017, but just in a general sense. And I thought it was interesting to talk to Matt Skura or Mike Flynn, who I called this week, who's teaching. He's got like a real job these days, so he couldn't come on this week. He's going to come on over the weekend after the game, but just talk to offensive linemen about what this feels like, what's Voorhees going through, what's Big Solid, these guys and McCary too, who he thinks he's a starter. He doesn't think he's a swing 6th offensive lineman. He thinks he wants to play 15 games this year.
Yeah, he wants to play. Well, it's a contract year for him. And I think that's part of this. I'm not saying that's the driving force, but that's part of this. And it's one reason why I think I know I mentioned this at some point in some of my 12 Ravens thoughts at BaltimorePositive.com, that I wondered if there was an extension to reach with him before the season, where what we're talking about, what you just talked about, isn't quite as much of an issue, where it's like, hey, you're signed for the next 2 years. We love you. We gave you some really good money. Would make you one of the highest paid 6th linemen in the league, because you deserve to be that at the very least. And yeah, you're going to get a shot at this, but you also know we drafted a kid in the 2nd round that we really like. So,
but look at how headstrong Orlando Brown was about being a left tackle and being paid like one, that he just willed himself out of an organization that could win. He had his own, he's got his own, dalliances with rings and whatnot, but it's an individual game. And we think of Pat McCary's being around here, and I had a conversation, but he'd like to go get a $40-50 million contract too.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's not going to get that, but he wants to get real money, sure. Yeah, I mean, any player, it's at the end of the day, it's a business, right? And that's part of this. But to go back to what I was saying, I was talking to someone last week about what this could look like early on, and I just laid out with you what I think it's going to look like on Thursday night. And look, that could change by the 2nd quarter on Thursday night. I mean, none of this is all in pencil right now. I mean, it really is, other than Linderbaum at center. Right. And Ronnie Stanley, I think if he's healthy, left tackle. Right. I mean, even that is still.
And he hasn't missed a practice, right? I saw that reported.
Yeah. Hey, I give him full credit. As much as I might be skeptical about Ronnie Stanley's play at this point in his career.
He's got $50 million in the bank. He didn't have to come do this. He didn't have to play if he didn't want to.
He's answered the bell. He has recognized the moment, right? He's recognized that this is a crossroads for his career. I mean, it is. Whether he's going to be in Baltimore beyond this year, whether it's going to be somewhere else.
And he can get a championship here this year. He'll play for the Falcons. That's not happening.
Of course. Yeah. But he's playing for his NFL future. And I don't mean that'll be out of the league, but if he has a so-so year, his next team probably isn't
going to be the Chiefs.
Solid ironclad that he's going to start. It might be that he has to compete for a job even. I mean, you don't know. But he has been out there every day. So what I think, for the baseline for what this offensive line, what I think it needs to be. And if it's better than this, then great, right? I mean, if they come out there and play great football on Thursday night and they push the Chiefs around, then I'll be surprised by that, but that's a pleasant surprise. But I think what you want to see, win or lose on Thursday night, can this be a group that looks, and look, this is such a subjective way of describing it. I'm not an offensive line guru, right? I'm not going to sit there and break down film like I'm a offensive line expert or savant or anything like that. But can this group look average? Can it look close to average at the very least? Can that be your baseline for week 1? If that's your baseline for week 1, Nestor, then I like their chances of getting better as the year goes on, because you're talking about young guys, because you're talking about guys who have some upside. You're talking about guys like Voorhees, for example, who might have been a third or fourth round pick before he tore his ACL at the combine last year, right? So you're talking about these young guys. If they can come out and look like a league average starting offensive line right off the bat, then to me, that bodes well for them by the year, but as the year goes on and come November and December, that they might be a top 10 or top 12 offensive line, which I think that's more than good enough when you talk about the boost you get from Lamar Jackson being under center, or more so on the shotgun and the pistol, and also Derrick Henry now as your running back, where you know you're talking about a quarterback with his mobility and a running back who, assuming he fights off Father Time for another year, I mean he's 30 years old. I'll continue to point that out. He has 2,000 career carries. You have to acknowledge that. But assuming those guys are themselves, and you know what kind of presence they are and how defenses have to account, especially for Lamar Jackson, knowing his threat to run or his threat as a scrambler, how that impacts your pass rush, then if this group come November and December can be, a top 10 kind of caliber offensive line, then I think that's more than good enough for the Ravens to be in position to get where they want to go in January. What you can't have, and this is where, again, it's an unknown right now. If this group comes out and looks like a bottom 5 in the league offensive line, or, not much better than a bottom 7, bottom 8, bottom quartile of the league offensive line, then you're wondering, okay, what is the upside? Can you be average by the end of the year? So, there's some unknown. And look, the bravado that John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta have, in the same way that any head coach and general manager has around the league. It's one of the most competitive environments you're going to find in any career field, obviously. But for John Harbaugh to acknowledge, questions are fair. I get the questions about it. For Eric DeCosta last week to acknowledge, yeah, there could be some hiccups. That tells you right there, they have some concern and some questions about this. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be catastrophic, but it's just a lot of unknown right now. And complicating that was the fact that Linderbaum missed most of training camp. And not that he won't be fine physically, but he just wasn't out there, right? Your center is so important to that process. So these guys just haven't stacked a ton of practice time together in the way that you'd like. So that's not an excuse, but it's part of it's one of the variables at work here, in addition to just how much inexperience Voorhees and Falele and Rosengarten have, right? I mean, it's where they are. So, we're going to see. But I think to come out of it feeling good about where they're going as an offensive line collectively, you want to see, be solid, right? Look like an average offensive line at the very least. And if you can do that week 1, week 2, week 3, I feel way better about projecting their upside as the year goes on. But if it's Lamar running for his life and Karlaftis and Chris Jones are in the backfield every other play, and Derrick Henry's getting stuffed and has 16 carries for 33 yards late in the third quarter, then yeah, we're going to be talking even more about the offensive line. So for me, it is the biggest question by far. I'll hear Zach Orr, I'll hear the pass rush, I'll hear just the turnover on the defensive side of the ball, I'll hear the wide receiver depth. I mean, all those things. Those to me fall within the normal range of questions that any team has, right? Any roster, any team. Questions that the Chiefs even have right now, like, for example, replacing L'Jarius Sneed and what that's going to look like, and the fact that Trent McDuffie's probably going to play on the outside more for them rather than just being at the nickel. And what does that look like? So every team has those questions. But for me, it's overwhelming if you're concerned about the fatal flaw for this team, something that could derail their season. And when I say derail, that doesn't mean 4-13, but, where they are struggling to make the playoffs, then it's their offensive line not being up to par, not being ready for the moment, going too much with a youth movement rather than maybe, revisionist history, maybe suggesting, oh, you should have kept at least one of Morgan Moses or Kevin Zeitler. So we're going to see starting Thursday night, and it's not going to be the complete picture, but boy, if they can go out there and give Lamar Jackson time and give Derrick Henry sufficient running room, and where, I'm not saying he has to run for $175, but at least he's averaging 4.5 yards per carry, or something like that, then I think you're feeling really good about this offensive line after that, win or lose. But if it's Lamar running for his life and they're getting stuffed at the line of scrimmage over and over, I mean, then yeah, we're going to be talking about this and we're going to be wondering, okay, this was the starting lineup this week. What's it going to look like in week 2? What's it going to look like in week 3? So, you want to start off with a good baseline here. And for me, if the baseline is kind of sort of average, then I'll take that with the idea that you have some young guys here that are getting their feet wet and getting acclimated to the NFL, and I'll feel way more optimistic. But I don't know if we're going to see that. I really, truly don't know how this offensive line is going to look, because even the preseason where it didn't look very good, you didn't have Linderbaum out there. You didn't have Ronnie Stanley out there. You didn't have Lamar Jackson out there. You didn't have Patrick Ricard out there. You didn't have Derrick Henry out there. So I don't know how much value there was, even looking at those guys on an individual basis, how much value there really was there. That's why this is the great experiment right now as it pertains to the Ravens 2024 Super Bowl aspirations.
Here's Luke Jones. We're getting ready for Thursday Night Football, kicking off the season. Who's the band that's playing? Who they bring in? They bring in Fergie? Did they have a band yet? Did they get the Stones?
No idea. You're asking the wrong guy on that. I mean, I'm
just trying to get fired up before the game because it's in my calendar on Thursday, and I'm an idiot. It's a game day. I don't have anything planned because I feel like I'm going to be sitting here all day waiting, which is pretty much what the football players do, which is pretty much what you and I would be doing if we were eating barbecue in Kansas City. It's just sitting around all day and waiting and waiting and waiting. But it's not that kind of day because the programming starts at 3 p.m. and they have concerts and Kansas City will be on fire and all that. How's my old buddy Eric DaCosta? The guy that helped ban me from doing my job that I wrote about this week. How's he doing? Because he's kind of like Loch Ness Monster, right? The head only comes out of the water only a couple times a year, right? He showed up last week. We won't see him again until, I guess, the elimination or the Super Bowl parade. I guess he becomes like a bear in a cave. What's going on with him? Because you haven't asked him a whole lot of questions. No one does.
Yeah, well, I mean, he spoke last week, and it's part of the NFL media policy for GMs.
He has to speak
after final cuts.
Okay, I didn't know that.
We talked about this late last week. I mean, final cuts about as chalk as it gets. I mean, Tyler Huntley's back on the practice squad. I wasn't shocked to see that because he was the number 4 in Cleveland. I mean, he never had a great shot of making the roster there. But there were, I mean, Demarion Williams, their 4th round corner from 2 years ago, is their biggest surprise cut, and that's not really a surprise. So, I think I think he's pleased with the fact that they're healthy. I think a lot of what I just said about the offensive line, he acknowledged that they made a concerted effort at the beginning of the offseason that they were going to go young, that they were going to rip the Band-Aid off, so to speak. And, we're going to see if Ronnie Stanley is after the year, if that's a continuation of pulling that Band-Aid, or maybe Ronnie Stanley as a second act, who knows? But clearly they made a concerted effort here. He acknowledged there are probably going to be some hiccups with the O-line. And I think, again, even if they go out there and they win on Thursday night, to me, there's going to be something about the offensive line that we're still asking about. Someone will struggle, or someone will get hurt, or something like that. There'll just be questions because it's one game, right? I mean, you don't decide everything over one game, but he acknowledged probably will be some hiccups along the way. But he made the comment that this offensive line a year from now will be in a way better place perception-wise than what it is right now. And any GM, any head coach is going to express confidence and conviction in what they do. They should, or they wouldn't be in that position to begin with. But I think it's this simple. And this goes back to what I talked about at the beginning of our conversation. If you have a healthy and upright Lamar Jackson, the Ravens have been royalty in the regular season for 5 years now. They've been one of the very best teams in the NFL for 5 years now in the regular season whenever Lamar Jackson's healthy.
Because nobody can figure that out. Nobody's been able to figure that out, right?
That's even with the injuries they had back in 21. Remember, that team was still in position to be a playoff team before Lamar Jackson got hurt. That was the case in 20 after Ronnie Stanley went down for the season. That was the case in 22 before Lamar got hurt then. And
part of it is they steamroll these NFC teams because nobody's ready to play him. Sure. Nobody has personnel to play this package. And, the Eddie George thing, or I keep calling him Eddie George, Derrick Henry thing continues to be the great unknown. You know what I
Sure.
mean? Like, I'd like to think that they're going to win the football game Thursday night because of Derrick Henry. I'd like to think that. And because of his existence, because in the fourth quarter, maybe you can't tackle him and maybe you can't get the ball back and the Ravens have a 9-point lead or whatever. Like, I'd like to see that difference being made in the way the Gus Bus did back at various points when they would get that lead and they would play, as Coach Hardball would say, Ravens football, and Ravens football is 2nd and 2, 1st and 10, 2nd and 3, 1st and 10. Oh, over your head, Flowers touchdown, 6 plays, 78 yards, we're up 7-0. Let's go towel off and send Roquan out there. Like, that's how it is when it's going well. I don't expect it to go that well against Kansas City. They're playing a real team. They're playing a lot of real teams early, dude. If you start to look at the schedule and you're like, at Dallas, Cincinnati, I mean, the Raiders thing next week, that better be like beating the White Sox this week. These 4 out of these 5 games are, I mean, I could look up and see them 2 and 3. Hey, it might be 4. If they're 4 and 1, everything you've said about Lamar, everything, Eric's a genius, John's a genius. Here we go again. They're the best team. Let's go January, right? But I don't know that it's going to be that easy for them. I look at the schedule, I look at their offensive line, I look at the atrophy, I look at what their profile was last year, and last year's never this year. We learned that. They won't be as good as they were last year. They won't be. They don't have the personnel to be as good as last year unless some magical things happen, which the running back would be the one key part that they've imported, and how much better Kyle Hamilton can be and all that. But I don't expect them to win on Thursday. You gonna give me your pick? Or are you gonna be that guy? You're gonna wait till Thursday. You gonna be that guy?
You got to check. You got to check it out at BaltimorePositive.com.
I hate when you do that to me. I thought we were friends.
Look, can they win on Thursday night? Of course they can. I mean, we're talking about a 17-10 game last year where Lamar Jackson played poor football. Their offensive line couldn't block anyone. Their defense gave up. Their defense gave up 2 touchdowns on the first 2 drives. The coaching was not good. They had some ill-timed penalties. They fumbled the ball going across, and they lost by 7. Right? I mean, again, we need to keep, and that's what you made mention of Derrick Henry. It's got to be more than that. They need Lamar Jackson to play like MVP Lamar, not January, not very good Lamar. Right? I mean, they need their defense to like. Here's something that I haven't mentioned yet, but I'll throw this out there. Zach Orr better be ready to adjust if Kansas City really tries to isolate Trenton Simpson in pass coverage, for example, because that's what they did to Patrick Queen 3 years ago when they came to Baltimore for that COVID Monday night game. And if you recall, Patrick Queen actually finished that game on the sideline because he actually got benched. I'm not down on Trenton Simpson, let me be clear, but this is a tough matchup for him, right? I mean, this is a tough matchup in general for Zach Orr in his first game as defensive coordinator. Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, they're going to have some stuff cooked up for them. I mean, there's no doubt. So, again, can you expect to hold them to 17 points like they did last January? Probably not. But I also expect the offense to do way better than 10 points. So they can win.
But they score 10 points again, they're going to lose.
Oh, of course. I mean, definitely. If they score 10 points again, then they're probably getting blown out, right? Because I don't think you can expect your defense to play at that level if they're not getting any backup from their offense, right? I mean, the defense was more than good enough to win in January, but they gave up some conversions on 3rd down early in the game. They got things tightened up, but gave up that cheap field goal at the end of the half. And then even when the Ravens made it a 1-score game, they couldn't get off the field at the end of the game. And
by the way, Baldinger broke down that halftime series where they threw the ball sort of inexplicably and didn't burn any time and gave the ball back to Kansas City with 2 minutes.
Sure. It was bad across the board.
Dude, you know me. I'm not Bob Haney. I'm not back watching Game 3 of the 1971 ALCS and I just don't do the revisionist thing. I know the game's been on a bunch. I haven't broken it down in that way, but this week it's all come back as that was a game I didn't want to watch again and again. Honestly, I watched it once, it was enough. But when you go back to those decisions, it really is about play calling and coaching in a way that I know why they did what they did in retrospect. It was a run down. We're going to throw. We're going to do what you don't expect us to do. And that's hardballing himself and paranoying himself into that Andy Reid's got my number thing. Andy Reid has his number, by the way. And that's another reason
Andy Reid
big
has lots of
game.
people's
Yeah,
numbers.
big game. Andy
I mean,
Reid,
let's just call it what it is.
John Harbaugh in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, I wouldn't bet on the Ravens Thursday night, and that goes back to a closet full of purple stuff I'll never wear again. But I don't expect them to win on Thursday night. I keep saying that out loud. Like, I'll be shocked if they win on Friday, but I will think they're a really good football team if they win on Thursday. If they win on Thursday night, I'll think you're really in for something. If they lose, I don't think it's that indicative. You go on the road week 1 against the world champions, you're supposed to lose. With a diminished team from last year, you're supposed to lose. But it would impress me if they find any way to win, whatever way it is, they find a win. And if they can find ways to have Mahomes make mistakes, that's really kind of a key, right? Like, as much as people see me as anti-Lamar, which is hilarious, the issue I thought that the Ravens would have with Lamar would be that the ball would hit the ground a lot because of that mesh point thing and communication and all of that. The Ravens don't turn the ball over much. Lamar's really takes care of the football over the history. It's one of the reasons he's great. He takes care of the football. So does Mahomes. And I would love to see turnovers be a part of this thing and finding a way for this defense to be that kind of defense, because that will turn the season. You know, a defense that can take the ball away a little bit will that's a different kind of defense. And I think this defense has that capability.
Well, I mean, they led the league in takeaways last year. They were tied for first, I think they were. Yeah, I think,
but not against Mahomes, I guess is my point. You
sure.
do that against Mahomes, you can beat them on the road. That's part of the theory for me is you're not just going to go down the field and beat them. You're going to have to. There could be some things around the edges here that are going to have to go right for them to win on Thursday night, and part of that would be taking the ball away, I think.
Or it might be a play on special teams, whatever it might be. I mean, look, it's.
I don't even understand the special teams anymore.
Sure,
what the hell these kickoffs are.
Although, you know what? Check back with me in 3 or 4 weeks. I think this kickoff's going to be a total bust. I think you're going to see teams are just going to end up kicking it in the end zone. Now, the difference will be we'll have a starting field position of the 30-yard line as opposed to the 25, which that should lead to more scoring. And I think that's part of what the league wants here. But the data suggested in the preseason, you're better off just kicking into the end zone because the average return was right around the 30-yard line. And if you boot it into the end zone for a touchback, they get it at the 30-yard line. So you do the math.
Zero risk.
Yeah. So I think you're going to end up seeing that. And even the general sentiment I've gotten talking to some people out in Owings Mills, I think that's what we're going to see. Now, who knows? Maybe it'll be different.
Well, especially if you have a kicker that can kick it.
But one thing I'm going to go back to that you mentioned about Lamar Jackson and this Ravens offense taking care of the football, having not played in the preseason whatsoever, no live game snaps, no snaps whatsoever that Lamar has played where he hasn't had the proverbial red jersey on, right? Keep in mind, Lamar had issues fumbling the ball early last year. Now, how much of that was no preseason? How much of that was the new offense with Todd Monken? I think those were very real variables, but you just said it. It's not just that you want your defense to take it away, but if you're going to have any chance against Mahomes on the road, Ravens can't turn it over the way they did in January, right? I mean, again, we can talk about the coaching, and the coaching was part of it. I'm not at all giving anyone a free pass, but that was a break. They broke down across the board, right? I mean, their stars didn't play like stars other than maybe Kyle Hamilton, but even he gave up a touchdown, even though it was a great catch by Kelsey. But, you need your MVP quarterback to play like an MVP. You need your stars at every level of the defense to be stars, whether we're talking about Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith, or the newly renamed Nnamdi Madubuike, going by his birth name. I thought kind of a cool thing out of respect and reverence for his parents. But you need your stars to come up big in a game like this. And fundamentally, simplistically, and we'll put this to bed kind of, sort of, but not really, because we're going to be talking about the Chiefs. But my biggest takeaway from last January was at the biggest moments in that game, who were the best players on the field, Nestor? Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. They were better than any players that the Ravens had on the field too often in crunch time in that game. And I think that was the difference. We can talk about running the ball and all these other different things that happened. And look, that was part of it. But their biggest stars were the biggest stars on the field that day. And the Ravens' biggest stars, starting with Lamar but also others, They didn't come up as big. They came up small in some really big situations. So, and same goes for coaching. I agree. Andy Reid outcoached John Harbaugh and his staff. No question about it. Steve Spagnuolo outcoached the Ravens. So, we'll see if it's different on Thursday night. I think the Ravens absolutely can win. I'm not going to be surprised or shocked if they do win. I'll be impressed. I already have high expectations for this football team as the year goes on, but it's a new year and it's a lot of unknown. And for me, again, it begins, how does that offensive line look? If that looks like something that has promise, even if it's choppy, then boy, the trajectory for this team remains very, very high. But if it comes out and it looks ugly and Lamar's running for his life and Derrick Henry's getting hit a yard and a half behind the line of scrimmage, then yeah, that early season schedule that you just mentioned, boy, that becomes a bigger talking point then. If you have an offensive line that's not controlling anyone at the line of scrimmage, then that Dallas game becomes even more daunting. That Buffalo game becomes trickier, even at home. And certainly going to Cincinnati in week 5 becomes a much taller order. So, our curiosity is going to be satisfied here. As you and I talk, we're counting down, and, we'll find out come, 8:20 on Thursday night. We'll start to get our first look at what this 2024 Ravens team is going to look like. But win or lose on Thursday night, I still have very high expectations for this team. But yeah, there's a lot of unknown and there could be some growing pains. I think it'd be naive not to expect at least some growing pains here and there, considering just how much turnover they endured this offseason.
Here's Luke Jones. He'll be watching football. We'll all be watching on Thursday night. I might even find some Kansas City barbecue before it's all over with. Maybe I should ship some in. I always, for all my sponsors, the Coco's and Costas and Faith, all my sponsors ship crab cakes out there. Do they ship barbecue here? Maybe I'll just go down the road, find some good barbecue here. Somebody find me some Kansas City barbecue in Baltimore. We got to fire this thing up here. Really strange Sunday because we're not going to have the Ravens are going to be playing on Sunday. Everything's Thursday night. Luke and I'll be here first thing Friday morning and all throughout the game on Thursday night, opining out on Elon Musk's fascist website. If you can wade through all of the Trump ads that I get on my timeline, you can actually experience some football out on X. Remember that was a WWE thing, right? Oh, no, that was sorry, that's the other way. He's Luke. He's Baltimore Luke. I'm Nestor. We got football. We got baseball. Everything I've ever dreamed of 33 years into this. Well, except a media pass, but I'm writing about that at Baltimore Positive.